the FRA were given expansive powers to intercept all communications travelling over fibre optic networks into and out of Sweden, including emails, text messages and phone calls. A large percentage of Russian communications travel through Sweden, and surveillance data has been shared with the NSA since 2011, including a, quote, unique collection of high priority Russian targets such as leadership, internal politics and energy, unquote. The Norwegian Intelligence Service, NIS, also works closely with the NSA, and in 2013 was reported as providing it with tens of millions of communications every month, focusing on Russian politicians, military and energy targets in particular. The Finnish government too has also been discussing surveillance policy, aimed partly at gaining access to its new undersea cable system called Sea Lion, which routes internet traffic directly to Germany. Russian communications may be able to bypass Sweden through this route. So the Baltic Sea is seen by many as a major theatre in a new type of arms race, cyber warfare. In 2016, in Warsaw, NATO agreed to recognise cyberspace as an operational domain alongside air, land and sea. Thus, cyber attacks against NATO countries can potentially trigger an Article 5 military response. That is, an attack on one country is an attack on all, increasing the possibility of NATO taking collective military action. However, determining the source of cyber attacks is not so easy, and technical evidence of them is rarely shared or clarified. Cyber warfare and hacking techniques are being used not only to attack technical installations, but also to plant false information to be used as propaganda by governments, the media and corporate interests. And NATO and Russia have accused each other of spreading so-called false news to win over public opinion. Sweden is involved in a US cyber war project called Quantum, and one of its operations known as Winterlight, a joint FRA, NSA and GCHQ, that's the British equivalent of NSA, project that involves hacking targeted computer systems and with subsequent data interception, diversion and tampering. In 2014, Latvia, Estonia, Germany, Italy, Lithuania, Poland and the UK signed a memorandum to establish a Stratcom Centre of Excellence in Riga, Latvia, which Sweden joined in 2015. Another Centre of Excellence for cold weather operations also operates in the north of Norway, near Løding. And there's more, of course. NATO and US missile defence bases in Europe are also provoking Russia. Soon after his election in 2008, President Obama shifted the emphasis of US missile defence from defending the homeland against intercontinental ballistic missiles to defending military operations against regional battleground threats. In so doing, he expanded the ship-based Aegis missile defence interception system and developed a land-based version called Aegis Ashore. The ship-based system can be readily positioned around the globe, and as of March last year, 17 were assigned to the Pacific Fleet and 16 to the Atlantic Fleet, with 4 being deployed in the Mediterranean. The US Navy's shipbuilding plan projects a total of between 80 and 97 by the end of 2043. As we've heard from Bruce, the ships are built at Bath Ironworks in Maine, near his home, but also therefore subject to regular demonstrations. The Aegis Ashore system is composed of a vertical launcher and support facility, similar to that used on the ships. And in addition to the Aegis systems, the US Army has also developed a land-based mobile terminal high altitude area defence, or THAAD system, to be deployed against short and intermediate range missiles. In 2010, NATO decided to expand the programme to cover Europe with the command centre at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. In 2012, a forward-based X-band radar system was established in Turkey, and in 2014 the US established the Aegis Ashore Naval Support Facility in Romania, which was activated in 2016, when the NATO BMD system, or Ballistic Missile Defense System, was also declared operational. The US also confirmed agreements to base 24 Aegis Ashore interceptors in Poland by 2018, and the hosting of US Aegis missile defense ships at Rota in southern Spain. The US claims these bases are needed as a defense against North Korea and Iran, but Russia sees them differently. Moscow believes that the purpose of, as Bruce has already explained, of missile defense is to downgrade its nuclear effectiveness by disabling its ability to retaliate to a US nuclear first strike. And Russia has repeatedly asked for legally binding assurances that NATO missile interceptors would not be used against Moscow's strategic missiles and therefore upset the strategic balance that Bruce talked about. However, Washington is unwilling to do this. Russia has reacted by threatening to deploy short-range Iskander missiles in Kaliningrad, close to the Polish border, as a countermeasure. In turn, this action and the conflict in Ukraine is used to justify the increase in military activity by the US and NATO. The US is also establishing THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems and military bases in the Pacific region, causing China similar concerns. Opposition to these confrontational global military systems is therefore increasingly important, as they are ratcheting up confrontation with Russia in Europe and China in the Pacific region. With Russia in Europe and China in the Pacific region. Moves towards nuclear disarmament are being blocked, and new arms races and new forms of warfare are developing, leading to potentially disastrous consequences. So in conclusion, really, the Western governments and media continue to claim that the increase in US and NATO military exercises in the establishment of bases along Eastern European and Scandinavian borders is in response to Russia's actions in Ukraine and Kaliningrad. However, Russia sees NATO and the US pushing military bases and escalating aggressive military exercises ever closer to its borders, despite past promises that it could never go there. NATO has 3.5 million troops stationed in over 100 bases in a ring around Russia, while Russia has some 900,000 armed troops. Who would you fear most? The Western media conveniently overlooks these figures. So as Bruce has already mentioned, we're really the world is faced by these challenges of nuclear war and climate change. Both of those require solutions that will mean cooperation, international cooperation, on a scale unheard of in the past. That's not happening. We need to make sure it happens from the grassroots. We are the people to create that change. Politicians are reluctant to. We have to make them do so, as Bruce has already mentioned. Well, I hope you'll join me in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. So if anyone has any questions or clarifications for that matter.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you really still believe in politicians being as the key player in the solution. I have another way of solving this, and that is creating a network of indigenous courts.
Speak louder.
I suggest creating a network of indigenous courts in the world, like 9 people, indigenous people in each country, create a court and make a decision, and it's valid by the law of common law. And then we all in various countries have these courts of indigenous people with the same decision to criminalize or put into psychiatric clinics these psychopaths, and we're done with them. What do you say about it?
Well, I think anything that works will do for me. These people are obviously in charge are psychopaths in some way or another. But I think we can persuade them to do other things. We've done it in the past. Bruce mentioned the time in the 80s when there were thousands of nuclear weapons throughout Europe. And this huge protest of people in Germany and throughout Europe to remove those missiles did actually do something. It worked. We removed them. Unfortunately, we didn't remove everything, but it could have been done at that time. I think Gorbachev was quite prepared to go full out for nuclear disarmament, but Reagan hesitated, or was made to hesitate anyway. So I think power comes from below. It comes from us, the grassroots. We can force our politicians to do things, and that's what we have to do. It doesn't look like we're working well enough at the moment. We're not coordinated enough. But the other kind of positive thing, we have to look for positives. The other positive thing about Trump being president, I think, it is bringing people out onto the streets. It is bringing people together. Different groups are coming together in one aim, and that is to prevent the madness that looks like it's coming ahead. In Britain, we had, I think, 100,000 women marched in London, the biggest march that's been there for a long time for this kind of thing. Things are growing. We had a huge march at the beginning of last year against nuclear weapons in London, 70,000 people. So we can build these things. We can build them together. We need to build alliances. We need to work together. But we can only do it that way. That's the only way we can do it.
It's not. It's not.
Well, okay, there are other ways. Let's try other ways too.
It's much easier.
Okay, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. I have to look at it a bit more closely. But anyway, okay. I think anything you can think of that might work, let's go for it and try it. Give it a go. So we need all the things that we can think of.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Regina Hagen is a board member of Global Network. She is from Darmstadt, Germany, and will speak about European satellites for military use and migration control. Please welcome Regina Hagen.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to come to Stockholm for this conference. I'm excited to be here. And some of you know me because I've been to Stockholm before. And I was also... Is there a problem with the sound? No? Okay, sorry. Okay. I was also participating in that conference in Kiruna a few years ago. And I must say I learned also a lot about the role of the Nordic countries in this global military and war system. So I think it's very, very useful to meet on occasions like this. I come, as Joanna said, from Germany, from Darmstadt, Germany, which you saw on Dave's slide, where the European Space Operations Center is. That plays a major role in all the European space activities. I will today talk about not NATO, although I will start actually with a quote, a joint quote from European Union and NATO, but I will talk about the European Union because the European Union is often overlooked as an actor when it comes to the militarization of policy in general and space in particular. And because people sometimes say, you're crazy, you're making this up, you're psychologically ill, you feel followed all the time. I use a lot of quotes and they might not be so easy to follow, but I am sure that Dave will put up the English scripts, the English version of the scripts and his slides on the Global Network page, I guess. And you have the Swedish version in this little brochure, so you, after the conference, you can read the quotes again, because it makes it a bit difficult to listen to me, maybe. And in the English version, you also have all the document names and the exact dates and everything, so that you can look up the documents yourself. as I say, I will start with a document that was issued in July 2016, half a year ago, at the Warsaw Summit of the European Union, and it's a joint declaration with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, with the NATO. And the document says, quote, "We," meaning NATO and European Union, "have to step up our efforts. We need new ways of working together and a new level of ambitions, because we have to make the most efficient use of resources. A stronger NATO and a stronger EU are mutually reinforcing. Together, they can better provide security in Europe," you see how they use the word security, "and beyond. In fulfilling the objectives above, we believe there is an urgent need to develop coherent, complementary and interoperable defense capabilities of European member states and NATO allies." End of quote. This statement is consistent with the ongoing militarization of the European Union as laid down in the Lisbon Treaty of December 2007. I quote, "The common security and defense policy shall be an integral part of the common foreign and security policy. Member states of the European Union, shall make civilian and military capabilities available to the Union for the implementation of the common security and defense policy. Member states shall undertake progressively to improve their military capabilities." End of quote. The decision to expand the scope of European Union politics to the military field actually dates back to 1992. Then, at the Petersberg Hotel, which is close to Bonn in Germany, European leaders formulated the so-called Petersberg tasks, which refer to humanitarian and rescue, peacekeeping, combat forces, that is fighting forces, in crisis management, and peacemaking. And the latter includes peace enforcement, which is fighting wars. This was 1992. 5 years later, these tasks were incorporated into the Treaty of the European Union. At about the same time, a redefinition of the word peaceful could be observed. Everything is now considered peaceful as long as it's not aggressive. And aggressive means starting a war. Everything else is peaceful. In the Lisbon Treaty of 2007, the European Union agreed to a common space policy and laid the basis for, I quote, "establishing any appropriate relations with the European Space Agency." End quote. Since then, the European Space Agency, which was founded in 1975 for exclusively peaceful purposes, and unlike NASA in the United States, is not an agency of the European Union. This ESA was drawn in the EU sphere of action. In November 2012, the European Commission proposed that ESA should become, I quote, "an intergovernmental organization under the authority of the European Union." And, this is really interesting, following to a certain extent the model of the European Defense Agency. And the Commission suggested that ESA should continue to develop into an organization in which military and civil programs can coexist. You see the dual use, civil and military, how this is getting hold in European space programs. About 10 years ago, the member of the European Parliament, Karl von Wogau, stated in a report to the European Parliament, I quote, "The satellite-based systems in the field of Earth observation and reconnaissance, telecommunication, navigation, positioning and timing are the eyes and ears of those who possess them. These can have military or civilian character. Therefore, it is crucial for the European Union countries to have access to data acquired by such systems." End quote. Last year, the European Commission again confirmed a prominent role of space for defense. I quote, "Space is of strategic importance for Europe. It reinforces Europe's role as a stronger global player, and it is an asset for its security and defense." End quote. And just recently, Rino Goos, a representative from the European Defence Agency, was reported as saying that the European Union needed space systems to be able to intervene successfully. Now, so far I've been talking more about the militarization of the European Union at all levels, you might have noticed, from individual members of parliaments, the parliament itself, the Commission, the European Defence Agency. The first quote was issued by the summit meeting, which is the heads of state and government of the European Union. I now will talk about the specific military uses of space and the dual use aspect. And I will start with a quote again, and it is from the European Parliamentary Research Service, which summed up the military uses of space technology. Quote, "Space-based capabilities and services play an increasingly critical role in security and defense posture, and as such are both an asset and a potential source of vulnerability. Satellite reconnaissance is the key function, allowing states to gather information about military build-up worldwide, strengthening significantly their situational awareness by predicting weather conditions, imagery intelligence, measurement and signature intelligence, or signals intelligence. The latter is called spying. Enhanced security of satellite communications make them invaluable at the highest political and military level, as well as for tactical communication between military units in the fields. Development of precision-guided munition, missile warning and launch detection, and space-based, listen Bruce, space-based missile defense systems are other examples of space-enabled defense capabilities. Due to the importance of space capabilities as force multiplier, there is an increasing risk of them becoming targets for other states. Consequently, the issue gained importance in the context of the Common Security and Defense Policy. The acronym is CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy in the European Union. In particular, with regard to space-based communication, situational awareness, and navigation and Earth observation capabilities. End quote. That was the European Parliament Research Service spelling out the use of space systems for the military. Space technology has an inherent dual-use character. That is, most of it is useful for both civilian and military purposes, which allows the European Union to sell its space program to the public, to us, as strictly civilian, while supporting the military dimension. In July last year, the European Parliament urged the relevant European bodies to, I quote, ensure that European space programs develop civilian space-based capabilities and services with relevance for the European security and defense capabilities, because the European Parliament continued, it believes that dual-use capacity of space capabilities is important in order to make the most efficient use of resources. The Parliament stresses that space programs have security and defense benefits that are technologically linked to civil benefits, and highlights in this, I'm still quoting, the Parliament highlights in this connection the dual-use capacity of Galileo and Copernicus. I will talk about these programs in a minute. Still quoting, the European Parliament believes this capacity should be fully developed, this dual-use capacity should be fully developed in the next generations of those programs, and it notes the need for better interaction between drones and satellites. It considers that future space features of the current European systems, they refer basically to Galileo and Copernicus, should be set, now listen, it's strictly civilian programs, right? It considers that future space features of the current European systems should be set according to the common security and defense policy requirements and covering all above related aspects. I call that a tremendous militarization of space. That was end of quote, by the way. It is also noteworthy that the space and cyberspace dimensions are increasingly connected in European policies. Dave pointed to that fact. And that the European Parliament formulated a clear future vision for the issue of security and defense as it, and I quote again, points out that in the long term, the European Union must have its own instruments establishing a defense union. End of quote. So now I want to show by the example of two specific programs, namely Galileo and Copernicus, what that means. You remember the strictly civilian programs. Copernicus and Galileo are the two so-called flagship space programs of the European Union, and they are run in cooperation with the European Space Agency, ESA. Under the European Research Programme Horizon 2020, a total of almost 13 billion, exactly 12.6 billion, are reserved for Galileo, Copernicus, and some other space research. And this is on top of the national budgets assigned for the European Space Agency. Copernicus is the European Earth Observation and Monitoring Programme, and one of the Copernicus services will be reserved for applications such as border surveillance, European external actions, this includes the security and foreign policy of the European Union, and, as they say, maritime surveillance. To give you an idea of the technology that is used for Copernicus, two of the Copernicus satellites carry a high-resolution radar to image the surface of Earth even through cloud and rain, and regardless of whether it is day or night. The satellites are on a polar orbit. That means that they encircle Earth over the south and the north poles. At an altitude of approximately 700 kilometers. That is, they revisit, because the Earth turns below those satellites, they revisit every area on Earth every 6 days. The main contractor companies for Copernicus are Thales Aliena Space, Italy, they produce the satellite, and Airbus Defence and Space, Germany, they produce the radar. One of the downlink stations for the radar data is situated on the Norwegian island Svalbard in the Atlantic Oceans. You saw the geographic location on the slide by Dave, and I'm sure we will hear more about the role of Svalbard from Bård. The tracking and telemetry data are transmitted to and from the Kiruna satellite station in northern Sweden. As an example of the security aspects of Copernicus, and I know that I'm going away from strictly military aspect, but I think we need to be aware of this, in particular with regards to the closing of the borders for refugees coming from other countries to Europe. I want to talk a little about the border surveillance, which is one feature of Copernicus. One of the main objectives here is to reduce the number of immigrants entering the European Union illegally. I don't think there can be illegal people, sorry. Every person has a right to be wherever. In November 2015, that was at the height of the so-called refugee wave. I don't know which term you used in Sweden. The terminology was horrible in Germany. In November 2015, the European Commission entrusted Frontex with the border surveillance of Copernicus. Are you aware of what Frontex is? It's the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, and they have the boats and everything else in the Mediterranean. And although they did pick up a lot of refugees that almost drowned in the Mediterranean, their real job is to keep them away. Frontex, in its term, supports the so-called European Border Surveillance System, Eurosur, a surveillance system of the European Union that uses drones, reconnaissance aircraft, offshore sensor and satellite remote sensing to track illegal immigration into the member states of the European Union. The preparatory work for this complex border surveillance system was developed under the research program of the European Union. As you can easily see, the securitization and the militarization of the European Union is like a kraken. It is omnipresent and penetrates all aspects of European activities and policies. In addition, the Copernicus service in support of European Union external action is operated by the European Union Satellite Center that used to be the satellite center for the Western European Union, which was the military arm of some of the European Union member states. The center is situated in Torrejón in Spain, and it provides the European Union with satellite and aerial imagery for the monitoring of events or activities outside Europe in support of common security and defense policy. And they always talk about environmental aspects and farming and rescue operations when they talk about Copernicus. They never tell you about these aspects. And it's very similar with the other system I briefly want to talk about, the Galileo system. That is expected to reach full operational capacity in 3 years, in 2020, and will consist in its end phase of 24 operating satellites plus 6 reserves in case one is damaged. And the satellites are manufactured by OHB Systems, a company in Germany, and Surrey Satellite Technology Limited from the United Kingdom. 18 satellites are currently in space and provide initial positioning, navigation and timing applications. And you might know that more under the name of GPS, because that's the American system and that has been in place a long time. Now Europe does its own, and it provides positioning, navigation and timing applications for many purposes. For example, it is used in industry, in farming, in transportation, for scientific purposes, and these satellites, these systems play a crucial role in modern warfighting. Satellite navigation is used by military aircraft, by ships, by ground vehicles, and by the personnel. It has changed weapons targeting, command and control. It provides guidance for unmanned systems, for drones, and it makes it easier to deliver supplies to the battlefield. That's the military usefulness of navigation satellites. The European Union insists that Galileo is a civilian system, arguing that it is under civilian control, not under military control. But the character of Galileo has shifted clearly over the years. In its 2016 resolution on, that's the name of the resolution, Space Capabilities for European Security and Defence, the European Parliament noted unambiguously, I quote, the importance of Galileo's public regulated service for navigation and guidance of military systems. Satellites systems like Galileo always have a space segment, that's the satellites, and a segment on the ground, or several ones. For Galileo, the Kiruna satellite station at Esrange Space Center, which is operated by the Swedish Space Corporation, is one of 2 telemetry, tracking and command stations for Galileo. The task of the Kiruna station is to monitor and control the Galileo constellation in space, to receive navigation signals from the satellites, and to transmit messages to the satellites. And the station at Svalbard is also involved. It is the uplink and sensor station for Galileo. So you see how closely your Nordic satellite stations are part of these systems. Without these stations you have here in the northern parts, these systems couldn't be operated the way they are. Now there is a host of other systems for either dual use or specifically military use in the European Union. For example, the European Data Relay System, which is a laser communication system, the most sophisticated in the world. The European Defence Agency supports MUSIS, the multinational space-based imaging system for surveillance, reconnaissance and observation. The European Defence Agency has another flagship program, the governmental satellite communication system, but I will not go into details here. I just, as a last concrete point in programs, I want to mention the relevance of the space launches of the Ariane, the launching rocket, and the spaceport in Kourou in French Guiana, because the European Union always stresses how important it is to have independent access to space. That is an independent way to bring those satellites to space independently from the United States or from Russia. Now often Soyuz missiles are used. And there is yet another organization which is also located in the town where I live, in Darmstadt, the European Meteorological Satellite Station, and weather forecasts and weather observation always plays an important role in military activities. In addition to all those European programs, there is a host of national programs, either dual use or dedicated military programs. I'm not aware of the Swedish ones. I live in Germany, so I know that Germany has an increasing number of military space programs, strictly for military use. Now, when you add all this up, the European Union and the European countries are a major player in this militarization of space. Thank you for listening.
Any questions?
I can see that the time is running very quickly.
Well, I will be here all day and in the evening for the party. So if you want to talk to me individually, feel free to do so.
All right, thank you, Regina. That's a great suggestion.
in charge.
No, I was only going to say that the next speaker was supposed to start in 20 minutes.
There is actually one speaker that couldn't make it today, so we have a little bit more time than planned. So I think we're doing okay. Thank you. Yes.
Because I have heard that they are planning also a station in Finland. And in Oulu or in Soda, I have... Hello. I would like to... I would like to ask, if you know, is that they going to plan a base station in Finland? Because I have heard that it will go either in Oulu or in Sodankylä or in Helsinki.
I have not heard about
ESA's plan, not NATO.
I have not heard about this, but
okay.
I will take a note and look into this when I come back home. Thank you.
No, I think we are lack of time. We have to continue, and I think maybe Kerstin, you might do it after lunch because Bård has a lot of pictures. I'm not sure how to solve this. We have to discuss that you might speak after lunch, because otherwise it will be too tight, I'm sure. What do you think, Bård?
It's too tight.
What do you think?
I talk about Finland as well.
You think it will do?
I will talk about Finland, yes.
No, it's not that. I mean, Kerstin is supposed to speak after you, and if it is too crowded, you are too long, then she can speak after lunch to add this. What do you think? You have 1/2 an hour and 10 minutes. Can you share it? I don't know how long you will be.
You decide.
No.
How long are you going to talk? Because half an hour. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
And then session half an hour.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
So, welcome up Bård Wormdal, who's a journalist at NRK, author of one of the books, The Satellite War and the Spy Base, which are available for purchase after the conference. He's a well-known guest speaker in Sweden, and today he will speak about how satellites are used in the US warfare. Thank you.
Hej My.
Okay, I hope I can have your attention for half an hour, and it's a hard session. It's a lot of information, a lot of facts. So I understand it's a bit difficult to follow. If you have questions during my presentation, don't hesitate to ask questions during the presentation. I stop if there's too many of them. Okay, I've been working for Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation for nearly 30 years, but I got interest for this issue about 20 years ago. I did first a documentary for television, and I have made 2 books on this issue about. It is about militarization of space, in fact, and especially Norway in that regard. U.S. intelligence, there are 6 organizations in the U.S. who are handling with military intelligence. NSA is one of them. And in this map you see all these countries, U.S. is cooperating, NSA is cooperating, in one of the 6. It's all the Nordic countries, and it's different countries around in the world, Australia for instance. But this cooperation with Nordic countries has been going on since the 50s. Sweden and Norway started at the same time. Sweden started in 1954, which is this is a document from Snowden revealed a couple of years ago. This cooperation with Sweden has been secret in Sweden for many, all these 50 years. But it has been all the same in Norway, this NSA cooperation. And it is interesting that both these countries, Norway, Sweden, this cooperation has been going on without public notice for 50 years. And it's quite similar cooperation, Sweden and Norway, and then this NSA cooperation. It has been important for US, and for both countries have been important for US in different subjects, but both countries have been very important. And of course, this kind of documents is very important because it tells real information about what is the situation.
Sorry, could you use this microphone to read? It's too.
You put it on me. Okay, you hear me better now?
Ja!
Much better.
Yes. And of course, a lot of this information about this cooperation is still secret. I have tried to get out most of it as possible, but still there's a lot of information I really think that the public should know. Okay, I talk about U.S. military intelligence cooperation with Norway, with NSA, but also with other military intelligence organizations in U.S. Here is the map of this U.S.-Norwegian intelligence cooperation today, and the location of them. Most of them are on the border to Russia. We have some locations in Nordland, at Andøya, one close by Bård, and the headquarters is in Oslo. But this activity is for intelligence toward Russia. It has been. It is the same today. First of all, I want to have your attention to this location here, close by Bård. It is a place called Fauske, which you drive, if you go by car in Northern Norway, you pass this place, Fauske. And it is building, this is the building where this, you see it from the road. And it has been functioning for
since the beginning of the 60s. And me as a journalist, it is easier to go back in the time. It's easier to get information when you go 50 years back. When you come closer today, it's more difficult. So quite a lot of the information I got is some years back, but you see the structure in that way. And that's interesting. And when it was built, it was not a Norwegian initiative. It was from the U.S. Embassy in Oslo. They wanted to have this station at Fauske as part of a global network to follow what Russia was doing in space. When we were back in the 60s, US was behind Russia in a way of militarization of space. And they were really afraid of losing that fight. And Fauske was one of the way, there was one station in Fauske, one in Turkey and one in Japan, to try to do surveillance of the Russians. And for me, one of the my documents is very interesting. And it's not a document. It was I talked with a guy who worked there. He told me who was working at the station, and suddenly on a working day they found out that Russians have got weapons in space. For the first time, it was notified from this place. They found out that the one Russian satellite destroyed another satellite. They could find signals from Fauske. And of course, if you think about the importance of this information in the 60s, it was of crucial importance for the Americans. And it tells about the significance of this kind of activity. It is on the highest possible level of importance between the superpowers. An incident in the 80s also tells about the importance of this station. We had this Falklands War in 1982. At that time, US and Britain did not have satellites to observe the area where the fighting was going on. But the Soviet did have this capacity. And this station, so they got the information of where the different kind of ships and planes were in the fighting area. But then there was this satellite, the Soviet satellites passed over Fauske, and this station in Fauske stole this information, grabbed it, and took it gave it to Britain. And as you maybe are aware of, this is one of the ships that was taken down by British submarine, Belgrano, and 300 people were killed.
300 Soviets.
Pardon?
Soviets.
No, this is people from Argentina. No, it's not functioning anymore.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, sorry. That's not good. But okay, I speak low then. But it tells about how important information is for warfare. Yes, you have a question?
General Belgrano wasn't it former Göta Lejon?
Pardon?
Was it a Swedish ship?
No, it was an Argentine ship with 300 soldiers on board that was sinking.
But earlier, wasn't it?
I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know that. You say so? Okay. And we also had an incident in the beginning of the 90s. It tells about the importance of this station. What was its importance in the beginning of the 90s? We had the Gulf War in 1991. There was quite a lot of US pilots that was sent to the ground. Their planes were grounded. They were supposed to have kind of equipment that the satellites would pick up the signals from the pilot on the ground. These US satellites didn't functioning well. They didn't functioning, but the Soviet satellites functioned. That they got the signals from the US pilots. And again, Fauske picked up these Soviet satellites, and this information was sent to the US. and the US sent helicopters and saved the lives of these soldiers. When you come up to the recent years, as with many locations in Norway, it's difficult to find information. But what I know,